It's been a year, and yet it still beggars belief. Here in Europe, in the 21st century, a World War I style artillery war unfolding. Thousands killed and vast parts of Ukraine's laid to waste. Now, whereas World War I was preceded by a decades-long buildup, 1 year on, we're still asking why Vladimir Putin made his surprise grab for Kyiv. To think that just a year ago we were marking 30 years since the breakup of the Soviet Union. What's left of a shared past between two nations? What can that past and this present teach us about our common future? For this special edition, we're honored to welcome prominent Ukrainian and Russian voices to ask, well, how they've changed over the last 12 months and what they've learned. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at Ukraine 1 year on. Joining us from Stanford, California, acclaimed best-selling Ukrainian novelist Andrei Korkov. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Your latest book, Diary of an Invasion. Here in the studio, we have Ukrainian pianist and composer Sasha Morozova. Thanks for being with us.
Hello, merci, and thank you for inviting.
We'll hear a little bit later on one of your composition. Ukrainian, let's see, where do we begin? Poet, artist, actor?
Not poet. I'm writing novels, yes.
You're writing novels now.
Movies,
okay.
Yes.
We want to welcome Irina Carpa. Thanks for joining us.
Good evening.
We're also pleased to welcome one of the founders of independent Russian television station TV Rain, Denis Katayev, today journalist at the international desk at Radio France.
Exactly.
Welcome.
Good evening.
Good to see you. Good to see Alexander Bitbov again, associate fellow at Paris's School of Higher Learning and Social Sciences, EHESS. Welcome back. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation you have on Facebook and Twitter, hashtag F24debate. Andrei Korkov, let's begin with a simple question. Where were you on the night of February the 24th, 2022?
I was at home, actually, and the night before we had a nice party with several friends, including journalists from New York Times and from The Guardian, Tim Judah and Luke Hardin. And at 5 o'clock in the morning, me and my wife, we were woken up by the explosions outside our windows in Kyiv. And we stayed one more day in Kyiv after that.
Were you expecting this?
No. I was expecting escalation in Donbass. I was thinking that probably Russia will try to take all administrative territories of two Donbass regions, but I was not prepared for all-out war and for shelling of practically all cities and regions of Ukraine in one night, like the Germans attacked Soviet Union on 22nd of June 1941. It was the same feeling.
The same feeling, and again, I hark back to that question of life during wartime. We didn't think we'd see it in this way on this continent.
Well, it is incredible. I mean, it is still 1 year on. I cannot believe it is happening, but it shows the abyss, mental abyss between us, Ukraine, Europe, and Russia with Putin. I mean, the fact that actually most of Russians are supporting this war, it shows that on the border between Ukraine and Russia, it's the border between psychological Europe and middle centuries.
Psychological Europe and middle centuries. We'll get back to that point. Sasha Morozova, when you think back, a year ago, you were still in the Ukrainian capital.
What?
you were in Ukraine 1 year ago.
Yes, at my home.
And you left in the month of March, April, and came here to France?
You know that I wake up from the when people took the luggage and they make a lot of sound. So I heard that people run with the luggage. So this sound makes me up, and I didn't hear the explosion, but. My friend who lived not far from Kyiv called me and asked me to come to her house. And I left Kyiv 24th of February at evening when I found Uber. So I left my flat with a little bag because I was sure that I will back soon to my flat. But actually I never back home from 24th of February. Yes, I left my flat that day and after never back home.
Why? Why have you not returned at all to Kyiv?
Because Russian came more close to Kiev, and it was very dangerous, and I lived alone, so it was not the best choice to stay alone and at home.
Now, you're not just a pianist, as we were saying at the outset, you're also a composer. Let's take a listen to what you composed in April. I believe this is called Wave for Peace. Let's take just a quick listen here. When did you compose this?
I think I started to compose this melody some years before, 22nd year. And you know that when you create a melody, I can never finish it quickly, so I create first melody, and after I thinking how to finish it, so during like maybe 2 years I fix it and finalize it. So it's like baby, you need time from the beginning to the
sound
finishing.
is in stark contrast to the brutality we've been describing up to now. Is that important for you, that the music that you make be music of peace?
Sure, because you know, music it's like gives hope and gives way to have this hope, and I think that I have to give this hope through my music.
Denis Katayev, do you consider yourself an exile, a refugee? You've left Russia and you're here now.
Yeah, definitely, because I left Russia because first of all, it's my conscience. It was my choice. I didn't want to stay among the people who cares about what's happening. I'm totally against the war after the occupation of Crimea. So that it was the clear decision for me to left my country. And second, of course, it was dangerous for us, for independent journalists, to stay there because we have already received a lot of messages from authorities to stop the broadcasting. This day I was like you on there, like a news presenter. So it was shocked. I was shocked, but we were broadcasting 24 hours, and step by step.
Your colleagues from TV Rain, they've a lot of them have now left Russia.
Yes.
Where are they?
They are in Europe and in Georgia. We have for nowadays we have 4 main bureau offices in Europe, so in Paris, in Amsterdam, in Riga, and Tbilisi. So we created a worldwide channel against Russian propaganda to continue our work.
And the incomprehension that you heard Andrei Kurkov formulate at the beginning of the show, the surprise, the incomprehension.
Yeah.
Did you feel that a year ago?
Yeah, of course. Just told you that I was shocked and I was surprised on there because, of course, all of us prepared for this war because we was talking about all over the days about the war who will happen someday. But as for me personally, it was a shock.
1 year on, a focal point of the fighting is the eastern Ukrainian city of Bakhmut. In December, France 24's James Andre met a father and a daughter who support opposite sides in the war. Let's take a look at part of that report.
Alexander and his sons have adapted to daily life under constant shelling.
Well, now we're kind of used to it, but at the beginning we couldn't sleep at night. It was so scary. The whole house was shaking. The floor was trembling like jelly, literally like jelly.
The war has ripped this family into 3 parts. Alexander's wife has fled to Russia with her grandson. Angelina is about to join her pro-Ukrainian brother in the West, and Alexander has decided to stay here with 2 of his sons.
I believe that Ukraine, if you want to call it Ukraine, is one country with Russia and Belarus, one people, one tree with different branches, and only one root. It hurts. Angelina is a difficult question for me. I think she doesn't really want to see us anymore. No one forced her to leave. She left on her own initiative. No one kicked her out. She just didn't like our way of living. She wanted freedom. Freedom in the worst sense of the word.
Next morning, Angelina and Maxime are ready to go. We meet them in a basement where they have their bags packed.
Let's go. I'm happy to leave the war zone, but I'm sad to leave my city behind. I hope I'll come back one day.
The evacuation bus is driven by volunteers who pick people up from the frontline cities and take them to safety. Today, Angelina and Maxime are the only passengers.
Sometimes it's 2 people, other times it's 15. It depends. The problem is that the cell phone network is down. So we just show up here at regular times and also pick up people who manage to call us.
I cried yesterday. It's really hard. I have no desire to leave. But there's no work, no money, you're cold and hungry all the time. I want to live, not just to survive.
Next stop, Dnipro, 260 kilometers to the west. There, Angelina and Maxime will have to start a new life while they wait for peace to return to Bakhmut.
Irina, Carpa, that divided family is a reminder that Ukraine, up until the Maidan revolution of 2013, 2014, was a split country. In terms of politically, there were those who were pro-Western and those who were pro-Russian.
Well, yeah.
It's now becoming less so the case. These are Russian-speaking areas where our reporters have found most of the people now embracing the EU, embracing the West. That family is though it's striking in that report. Is it a generational thing?
Well, no, it's a brainwashing thing, I think. And like for this Angelina, you can just want to say, go Angelina, go girl, just leave those people brainwashed or even brain dead. It's really striking how this man, after everything he saw on the news, how he can talk about this like 1 tree roots, whatever. And by the way, yes, like Sasha makes music to soothe souls of people. I'm sure that the peace will come after the victory, but I'm making the course of therapeutic writing for different women, Ukrainians, who left the country, who stayed there, and they all write about the experience of their war. So like what struck me in one of the short stories, the girl, she wrote, the day when Bucha was discovered, everything like tortures, rapes, and so on, her dad called her from Russia and said like, oh, daughter, don't believe the TV. It's not true. We're gonna come and save you. So can you imagine this, like the power of brainwashing, of propaganda, that the fathers don't believe daughters and they get judgmental. Well, anyway, like one of the biggest things that we made between like during this year of war, we didn't leave Bucha to become full Ukraine. I mean, like tortures in Bucha. We stop it there, and like this is why Ukrainians continue to fight to stop the terror. And coming back to your question, it's like Putin's plan to denazify Ukraine. It worked completely vice versa because Ukraine is more united than ever. People who yesterday were Russian speakers, they turned into Ukrainian today. Like the mom of my friend who's from Zaporizhia, she's 60 years old, so like it's not easy, right, to readjust. She called her the next day, the 25th, and she said, I'm not speaking the language of occupant, my daughter. So like people make efforts, they make mistakes, but it's so precious, it's so important. And we can see the regions which were and stay majority Russophones, right? Like Russophone, what is it in English, the correct word? Like Russian-speaking regions, like Mariupol, Kharkiv, Dnipro, which we just saw. But people there, that doesn't mean that they are pro-Russians. They were the first one to be to have those strikes by Russia, and they are the first one to resist. And you could see the people from Kherson who were facing the Russian tanks with Ukrainian flags. So no, actually, in Ukraine, speaking Russian doesn't mean to be pro-Russian. The case of this man, of course, it happens. Like we always have people who are like brain dead, brainwashed. Like even in families of people I know, of writers, you know, like they call back to Kharkiv, "Mom, how are you?" And dad says like, "We are sitting here, we're waiting for the call to action from Russia." So like they just quit talking to them. You know, like many families are just cut by this situation.
Would you say that it's more divided than during Maidan?
No, not at all. It's not a generalizing. What I want to say, it's more like of a singular cases than of generalization. Ukraine is united today. We can see the humanism, we can see the solidarity, we can even see that like what is like real miracle. Even Russians are not dehumanized for us. You can see this like hotlines that like Ukrainian mothers calling to moms of Russian soldiers and like just telling, do you want to take a body of your child? Or like to the Russian soldiers as well, do you want to leave so you can just go and surrender? Like we are not here to kill you, so like just give up your weapons, and because your country doesn't need you, but your family needs you. So like you can see we still use this like very approach, like human approach. Like this is the biggest miracle of this war. It didn't turn us into monsters.
All right, Sasha Morozova's music soothes. Late 2021. The eclectic headbangers of Ukrainian indie band Carpa put out a video for their single. I guess it translates as "Ladies are
cool dudes."
Are
yes.
cool
Chicks
dudes.
are cool dudes.
Chicks
yes.
are cool dudes. Let's take a quick listen to that.
And it's filmed in Paris.
Помади, каблучки, білкова дієта, пілатес, лоукости, Мілан, Інстаграм, посади, машина, кар'єра, і діти, свій бізнес, квартира, стояк, розіграм.
So this was for the 8th of March, for an International Women's Day, Girl Power. And there's no foreboding in this. This isn't like, but there is the conflict going on.
Yes, and you can see military girls, and we have now about 50,000 women involved into the army. Like even as commanders, it's like it never happened before. Like it's really incredible thing. Yeah, sorry, I keep interrupting you.
No, it's because we come back again and again, Alexander Bykov, to what Andrei Korkov said at the outset of this conversation, which is the surprise of February the 24th, 2022. Now, in this very studio, a couple of months back, you gave one explanation as to why Vladimir Putin did this. And you said one of the possible reasons may be a follow-up from COVID, that there is a link somehow. Explain that, and do you stand by what you said then?
Sure. It was unexpected for many observers and participants also in Russia. Not only for those who were opposed to the Putin's government, but to the people around Putin and to the Russian elites who were manifesting quite a conformist attitude. And this unexpected character of the war was based on an illusion of the compromise which was kept during the previous years and even decades in the Russian society between the extra-conservative and ultra-liberal factions of participants. So what COVID implemented in this balance of forces was the benefit of isolation of Vladimir Putin, who changed completely his style of communication, not with people, because he never communicated directly with people. And, for example, he introduced this institution of the speech in front of the federal assembly.
The one we saw this week in front of the Duma.
Which was demonstrated once again, and not to the representatives of the civil society, for example. So what changed basically in this model is that before the COVID, his communication with the ministers and with the experts was based on more collegial idea or more collegial model. And he was first consulting the experts in the field, and then he was taking decisions. There are several testimonies which attest that during the COVID, the model changed completely.
His inner circle got more isolated.
First, then he was teaching lessons to the ministers. So he took in some way the role of Stalin, not in the whole potency of this role, but in the sense of being more acknowledgeable, being more expert than field experts and ministers of his government. So the idea was that he was not in need of expertise to prepare his decisions.
And so now, 1 year on, what is this about? Is it some kind of, why did he invade Ukraine? I'm sorry, I'll just put the question again. I know it's been asked a billion times, but here we go.
I think you're right. We need to put this question again several months later and then again, just because it's so unbelievable as it was already told by several participants.
And has your view on that evolved in the last year?
Yes. I studied analyzing more deeply the economical reasons of this war, not in the banal sense of being or not being adherent to the economical rationality, because in some way there is always economical reasons and interests. And I realized that from 2000 until 2015-17, Putin's government was his close circle was quite a strong proponent of neoliberal idea based on productivity, intensifying productivity and free exchange was more or less the adopted idea, which was based in...
So now that he's not listening to anybody anymore, is, as you say, has he become more messianic? Has he become more ideal? Is it all about ideology?
For sure, because as long as the communication is restricted, someone comes back to his own ideas and to the ideas of the very restrained circle of experts who bring the neoconservative or traditionalist tint to the conversation. So, and the second reason, so the restriction of the communication and turning back to saying FSB, KGB sensibilities. And the next step was just the fact that the Russian economy was not competitive enough to stay well in the international competition. And I think the calculation which was connected with, for example, distancing from Kudrin and from other experts who were praising the international role and the international convention, economical conventions that Russia should maintain in this period, the evacuation of these experts brought the experts who were mostly for territory, for sovereignization of resource management, and for the isolation of the financial system of Russia.
The stars aligned towards a more us versus them view of the world. Denis Kateev.
I think that this is the madness, first of all, and I think that the main idea of Putin, why he began this war, why he involved in Ukraine, the main idea is restore the Soviet Union. This is the new idea for him. I think he created it years ago. All of us remember his speech in Munich conference. It was 15 years ago.
2007.
Yeah, 2007. So he declared this idea that he wanted to restore the Soviet Union. And now he was in isolation during the COVID. Now Russia itself in isolation, total isolation. And after the authoritarianism, we came back to totalitarianism is a Stalin way. I think, for example, it's not possible just to meet people in Tinder now as you gay, as you LGBT. So this is a completely, definitely Sovietic idea, this idea to restore Soviet Union.
Irina Carpa.
Yes, it's still they still have this idea to restore the Soviet Union, as you say, but right now they understand, like Ukraine. No, actually, they thought they would take Ukraine in 3 days, but they broke their teeth.
Yeah.
But and now, like if you see 73, I guess, % of Russians, they say they are okay for
is no
stopping
statistic in
for
Russia.
stopping the
Sociology.
military operation, but they are not against of going and invading other ex-Soviet countries, just like to have this. But first of all, I think why Ukraine? Because it's not the smallest country after all. They could go for Turkmenistan and so on. It's because he still cannot pardon us the Maidan, the freedom. He's afraid of freedom, as every dictator, because we are such a bad example for his own people to be awakened. And they saw, like, he saw that we are moving towards democracy, towards the West, and this is something that he could not forget. But after all, it's very interesting. We became more powerful. We became stronger after this year. And I think when Ukraine wins this war, our victory, it's going to be a very good wake-up for Russian people as well, to finally start building the democracy.
But as you say, right now the opinion polls are yet to show that inside of Russia. Last summer, I picked up Andrei Korkov's first novel, Death and the Penguin, couldn't put it down. And in it, you see that it was written about the days when the old Soviet order was crumbling, days of the nascent cowboy capitalism, ruthless score settling. There's a mix of terror and nonchalance as characters brace themselves for violent ends. Andrei Korkov, I was so surprised reading that novel about how different it was then. Is it is it the same country we're talking about? Because it is set in Ukraine.
Well, from 1991-92, I think Ukraine was 5 different countries with different phases, which were very, dramatically different one from another. I mean, we lived through the mafia wars, we lived through the grassroots corruption, and we came to the situation when we became actually Eastern European country with probably corruption on the top in the industries, but not on the grassroots level. And I mean, the country before 2022, in spite of the 8 years of slow war, it was and it remains a European civilized country, just like Poland or Czech Republic.
And we discover when the war begins that well, not only do the Ukrainians know how to defend themselves, but they know how to code. They have a civil society. Again, Andrei Korkov, were you surprised at your country's own resilience?
Yes and no, because Russians and Ukrainians have different mentality. I mean, Russians are fatalists. Fatalism is not something that Ukrainians possess. Ukrainians are optimists, and they are ready to express their views, and they are used to be respected, and they also used to disrespect the government and the leaders. And sometimes I think they choose a president or a leader to hate and to keep him as somebody guilty for things which are going wrong. So in this sense, actually, the individualism of Ukrainians, they were taking their own decisions to go to the front as volunteers, to start enrolling in the army, to fundraise the money, etc. So, I mean, the army in the Ukraine is partially fundraised by people, by the society. And Russians are doing what they are told. They believe they can change nothing. So, I mean, we have two completely different opposite mentalities. And this is the force of Ukraine, because Ukraine never had royal family from 16th century. I mean, they were choosing their hetmans, they were choosing higher officers, electing them, and then replacing them. And even in the time of Putin's reign, in last 22 years, we had 5 presidents. So I mean, this is the reason why Ukrainians active and the resilience is so active and unbelievable for many people who didn't know this difference between Russians and Ukrainians.
I want to pick up on something that Irina Carpa touched on, Andrei Korkov, the language issue. The Russian speakers who are now learning Ukrainian. We have a report on France 24's mobile site about in Odessa, which is the famed resort where everybody from from across the former Soviet Union would go to vacation. They now more and more are hesitant about speaking Russian. Even there, you write in Russian. Is this going to be in the long term a problem? Two different languages for one nation?
Well, I mean, there are many languages spoken in Ukraine, including Crimean, Tatar, and Hungarian, and Polish. But of course, I mean, the Russian language is referred to as language of the enemy, in spite of the fact that up to 40% of Ukrainians are Russian speakers. The younger Ukrainians from Russian-speaking regions very often are bilingual, and they are not actually, they are speaking more Ukrainian now because it is fashionable, because it is actually a language of resistance. It is language, the marker of being one of ours. It creates problems for all the generation of Russian speakers who cannot change, who cannot learn language, and who are stubborn. And actually, there is a generation issue, I should say. And it's also because the people who lived in the Soviet Union and were formed in the Soviet Union, I mean, they possess Russian Soviet collective mentality. Very often, they are not individualists. And the nostalgia for the Soviet times was sponsored and supported by Russia in all the ex-Soviet republics. I mean, one of the favorite TV channels in Donbass was TV channel which is called Nostalgia from Russia, with broadcasting of old Soviet films and old Soviet comedy shows.
Sasha Morozova, does that resonate when you hear Andrei Kukov talking about the irreverence of the Ukrainians, how they like to criticize their leaders, how they have is there a different mentality between Ukraine and Russia?
For sure, there are different mentality. And you know that if to look to the history, Russia every time have Tsar, and all the people support Tsar, and they don't decide what to do because they believe Tsar. They're like king who told them what to do. And Ukraine have Hetman, it's like father. But we change Hetman, we change president, and we like to choose. And if we was wrong with our choice, we go and change. And you know, like this freedom in our blood. During the history, we try to be independent. And during last 5 centuries, Russian kill Ukrainians during the Holodomor, shooting Renaissance. Like a lot of intelligent people was killed by Russian system, like USSR and before time. So it's was not first time when Russian kill us, and it's during last centuries, but we still fighting. And yeah, so it's totally different mentality. Totally different.
Totally different mentality, you say. There are universal values. You heard earlier Alexander Bikbov talking about how in Moscow itself there's this tug of war between sovereignists and liberals. And 3 weeks into, after the February the 24th, you had a woman, Marina Oskianikova, who ran onto the set of the big TV station Channel 1, transmitting. She shouted, "Stop the war, no to the war." She's now in Paris, by the way. But did Putin critics project a bit too much when they cheered her bravery? At Moscow's Luzhniki Stadium this Wednesday, a state-sponsored Glory to the Defenders of the Fatherland concert punctuated by a speech by President Putin himself.
Everything that is happening today, this consolidation of national unity, is reminiscent of the great patriotic war. So we all have to be together. We have to support each other. And of course, we have to win.
The Great Patriotic War, Alexander Bikbov, that's World War II. But as the polls say, this is something that, you know, there is a majority of Russians who stand by their military and stand by their president.
We need to admit one fundamental fact that in the moment when the Ukrainian society operates the trauma of the war, the Russian society is oppressing the same trauma. It's not the same traumatism of being perpetrator, but it is still a traumatism. So one of the reasons of these discourses, one of the reasons of this attitude manifested publicly is not to affront, not to face the very dramatic reality, which is not only the drama of the Ukrainian society, but also the tragedy of the Russian one, which becomes a marginalized society, not only in the sense of the international glory of this or that country, but also in terms, for example, of inequalities. The inequalities, the war bolstered inequalities in Russia, in Russian territory, between the regions, but also in different social stratas, in a rocket way. And this is something which is very little discussed inside Russia.
Denis Katev, what do you say when...
I want to say that, first of all, it was a prepared meeting, of course, and poverty is the basis of Putin's regime. And that is why he he benefits from this poverty and these people, and many of us, like me, many progressive minorities, they have already left the country, and so for Putin it's okay situation like this. People like
he's saying great, isn't he?
Yes, people like
Denis
this.
has left. That's.
Yes, it's okay. It's okay for Putin, so that is why no problem. So I want to say that, of course, there are a lot of people from Moscow, from Petersburg, young people who are against this in war, but first of all, they have already left the country, and second, it's dangerous. It's very dangerous for them now to express themselves.
This has, Andrei Korkov, it's got to be painful. I know your grandfather died fighting the Nazis in the liberation of the city of Kharkiv. There is a shared history.
Well, it is shared history, but it's different war, and actually the history will not be shared anymore. I mean, we can say that Poltava battle is also a shared history, and this is probably what drives also Putin now in this war, because he wants to repeat Peter the Great's victory over Ukrainian troops. In 1709, the Ukrainian troops led by Hetman Mazepa and held by Swedish army by Karl XII were defeated by Peter the Great. And Peter the Great was the one who signed the first decree against Ukrainian language in 1720, banning Ukrainian religious text to be published. So, I mean, I think at the same time, for Putin, Ukraine is eternal enemy, rival, and people that should be assimilated for the security of Russian Empire.
Verena Carpa?
Yes, coming back to this speech, like you could see they almost were asleep, like even his closest, bureaucrats. But what I wanted to say is like Russia is finally understanding that they are losing this war. And like we can see that how defeated they are and how disappointed they are. And actually right now, they probably will understand the real meaning of this war and like how it plays on the world's safety, right? Like even Navalny, so Russian opposition now, the guy who's famous to say like Crimea is not a sandwich to be split. Right now, he's talking about reestablishing of Ukrainian borders in 1991. So like including Donbass and Crimea. This is very important. So actually like this opposition will stop sitting on two chairs, like being Democrats.
Let me just play devil's advocate here. Victory can take many forms for Vladimir Putin. If he manages to reduce all of the Donbass to rubble, that to a certain degree could be perceived very cynically as a victory.
For him, every I think even the small village he will win right now. He will say it like, okay, this is the great victory, but this is not true, and we can see everybody understand this. Like his milieu, like Prigozhin, etc. Even Russian chauvinists are disappointed right now what's going on, and Russian society, I think now they should start respecting the freedom. Like before, we were mocked for Maidan. Okay, you're jumping there in Maidan during this revolution. Now they understand it actually can lead the way to the light. And actually freedom, what is freedom? It's when the citizen can take part of organizing your country. Russian Empire is famous for oppressing, first of all, the Russian citizen, like making it slave, like you cannot decide. And this is like learned helplessness. I'm such a small person, I cannot do anything. Like they learned to do it. And right now, actually,
unfortunately,
I hope it's gonna, like I'm projecting,
yes.
like very optimistic scenario.
Yes,
so it's
very optimistic because majority of people for who now support Putin.
But you can see Putin now. Why we can also see that he's so that he understands he's losing. He's promising, I'm going to make a good roads for you. I'm going to, I'm going to pay you. So all these promises and promises again. And the big question is if Russia will be able to use it, if they will finally, like Russian citizens, understand this, like respect to yourself means respect to your neighbor.
Except
it starts from
Russia's a vast country, and Alexander Bitbov, you heard Andrei Kurkov say how Russians are fatalists. So if there are potholes in those roads that he's promised to fix, at the end of the day, does it matter?
I wouldn't put too much weight on some historical mythologies about how Russian Empire was or their national character, because there are mechanisms which explain maybe better and in a more precise way what's happening now. And I think that for all of us here in the studio, but also for the most part of the spectators, it's unimaginable the way the Russian propaganda works now. And the work of the propaganda is omnipresent. It's a kind of tornado of sense and nonsense, which is projected and burst towards the population. And within this tornado, one of the effects of this tornado, I was speaking about the trauma of the perpetrator, which is oppressed, which is evacuated from the public field of discussion. One of the functions of this propaganda is to neutralize the idea of the war. Not just to boost the idea of the just war, but to let people be at a distance of it.
Yeah, because special military operation. It's
some people were wondering if, in that State of the Nation address before the Duma on Tuesday, Vladimir Putin might call it a war, and he didn't.
Mm-hmm. No. Sure.
Because it would mean that they're losing the war.
Yeah,
like,
maybe.
If they lose. Yes.
But I think that we'll see some changes after the defeat of Russia and Putin, after the victory of Ukraine. We will see changes in Russian society. And Crimea is the most important thing in this revolution in the mind, because Crimea this is a sacred place to Putin. So if we return to the borders of 1991,
we didn't hear Joe Biden when he was in Kyiv say go to Crimea.
We'll see some changes, because from the majority of Russian society, Crimea is the point. If they see that Crimea return to Ukraine, maybe they will change something in their heads, in their minds.
What do you mean, change in what way?
The support of Putin. Because Putin's propaganda, Crimea is the most important point. If they lose this point, Putin will lose.
It's a holy cow for Putin. So it was the biggest seduction for Russians to lead this war. Like, okay, look, this jewel is ours right now. Krim nash. There were hashtags
Crimea
and so on. Crimea is ours, right?
Yeah.
In the novel Grey Bees by Andrei Kurkov, there's a protagonist, Sergeyevich. He has to navigate cultural, language, and religious divides. And there's a line in it in which you write, bees alone had managed to establish communism in their hives thanks to their orderliness and labor. Ants, on the other hand, had only reached the stage of real natural socialism. They had nothing to produce. And so had merely mastered order and equality. But people had neither order nor equality. After a year, is your faith in human nature further diminished, or is it been bolstered by what you've seen?
Well, this wars belong to the character who grew up in Donbass in the very collective society, an industrial region where the propaganda was working very hard even in the Soviet times, telling them that they are privileged class because they are producing the wealth of the Soviet Union. So these are not my words. My faith in humanism remains the same, and my faith in Ukrainian nation is 1,000 times more now. I don't have any faith in Russian nation, because, the Russian fatalism became aggressive fatalism, because for Russians, priority became more, stability became more important than freedom. For Ukrainians, freedom was always the priority. Stability was never there, and it is still not there now because of this war, because of Russian aggression. So I do believe in Ukrainians. One day, maybe I will start also having faith in Russian nation, in Russian society, but not at the moment.
Alexander Bikbov, is it difficult for you to have this conversation?
Not at all. On the contrary, I am a bit more reticent if the topic comes to Russia as a kind of monolithic historical formation which never changed or was never changing, about Russian people who has some special character, etc. For me, as sociologist, they are just objects of deconstruction. On the contrary, I am very sensitive to...
and do you share that lack of faith?
I would say yes, in the sense that I observe an incredible, for the 21st century, effect of the nation building, which was thought by many historians and political scientists as the fact of the past. The Ukrainian society is constructing its nation. And this is something which is quite just unbelievable historically.
And perhaps an example, the way Dennis was describing it?
An example of...
for Russians.
For the Russians, I'm not sure in that, because the Russian construction of the nation was based mostly on a kind of phantom idea of the external invasion. If you remember well, for example, the change of the Revolution Day, the celebration of the Russian Socialist Revolution, was changed and misplaced in favor of so-called Independence Day. From whom? From the Polish invasion from the 17th century. I mean, the whole construction of the Russian official nationalism is based on a fake idea of the external invasion.
How to get beyond us versus them? Definitely a question to ask. I want to thank you so much for being with us, Alexander Bikbov. I want to thank as well Sasha Morozova, Irina Carpa, Denis Katayev, Andrei Kurkov in Stanford, California. Thank you for being with us here. Our special edition of From Kyiv, it takes place Friday at 6 p.m. Paris time, followed by a special edition of The World This Week.